Hey, live from Denver. It's Friday night. Welcome to Critical Conversations, the weekly show where, well, we get to let our hair down because we have so much of it. And of course, my wife has hers up this week. So I am joined by my beautiful wife, Melissa. Hey,
Hello.
everybody. All right. Good. So what a week. What a time to be alive. What a year. What a millennia. Quite a bit happening. Let's see. And this is Friday, September 22nd in the year of our Lord, 2023. And, hey, seeing all the usual critics and suspects here. Yes, all is well. We will have all the usual things for you. I have prepared papers with highlights and things. It'll be fun. It'll be interesting. But first, let's do our little welcome to our show. Is there anything you want to say about this week, particularly?
About trauma and memory? I mean,
just the week.
Oh, okay.
The week.
I'm tired. I've had a long week. I've done a lot of stuff. I went and saw a comedy show last night. It was a lot of fun, but I'm real tired. Went to bed late, got up early. But she was hilarious. It was Taylor Tomlinson. And she had to deal with like 2 or 3 super drunk people that were making noise. And one of them even laid down in the middle of the floor.
Unbelievable.
So she handled it smoothly.
Yes, exactly. I certainly am glad that it's Friday. And also glad to hear everybody saying hi from the other lives and everything. It's great. We got so many channels doing so much work now. It's really quite awesome. Because for so long it felt so lonely in terms of the YouTube space on this. I mean, there are people who have come into this who had never even heard of me now, which is really kind of not fun, but that's fine because it's a big community now, and it's good that it's such a different problem to have, because I would much rather have this situation and people maybe bumping into each other more than you're standing alone in the desert and you're the only one saying anything and nobody's hearing it. Nobody's hearing it. No one, and that's no good. That is no good at all, especially on something like this. It affects so many people, touches so many people's lives. And when you start thinking about how this concept or this term of cults and the psychological damage and the nonsense that it gets up to, when you start thinking about how that works in the big wide world, and it's not just these fringy, silly groups like Scientology or like, the 2x2 or whatever. I mean, you're going to hear more in the coming weeks from some people coming on the show who, on my podcast, who are going to be coming from some things you all might not have even heard of before. I mean, there's just so much stuff out there of nonsense of people just taking advantage of other people, and not just in a religious sense, of course, as we talk about. I'm really interested in really getting this messaging over into the multi-level marketing world now, because that's a whole place where they really have not connected the dots on this as well as we have in this space. So I'm hoping to kind of bring those together. Quite a productive week, quite a lot going on. I'm still getting my feet grounded in TikTok and how to post there and post on Instagram. And then today, then there's Threads where nobody is, but maybe I should be posting my stuff there too. So, and then there's Twitter, which is, we keep thinking, rumors of its death have been greatly exaggerated by me and others. I mean, it just keeps going. So,
I'm wondering what will happen if he makes it pay to play, though.
Yeah, that means I won't be there anymore. I will not.
Me either. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to delete my account. I'm not going to do that again. But it looked like he was walking that back already. We're talking about Elon Musk having said he was going to charge people for being on Twitter at all, like a monthly subscription plan or something. And if he does, he's going to lose an awful lot of people. And this is his idea of how to get rid of bots, and sure enough, if you had to pay, then, bots probably wouldn't be as prominent on a platform. And
certain bots still would be the...
Well, some would certainly pay for it, but
like, sure.
It's if you want to switch up the model in the middle of this, after we've already had a couple decades of advertising models, I think it should call for a much greater thing than just maunderings on a podcast or on a show somewhere about, oh yeah, or during an earnings call or something. Yeah, we're going to start putting in a monthly subscription plan thing. This whole thing was supposed to be free for everybody because they were going to charge advertisers for advertising, and that whole thing about how we became the product. And now it's all of that awful, but now they're going to charge us for the privilege as well. It's so out of control and stupid what is happening with every single one of the social media platforms. This is YouTube, this is Twitter, this is Facebook, all of them, that they just betray us. They say, oh, here you can have this, and here's the terms. Oh, but now we're going to change the terms, and then we're going to change them again, then we're going to change them again, then we're going to change them again every 6 months. And you're not going to know what the changes are. You're going to hope that we're going to summarize them for you, but we don't have to. And it turns out we might be writing things into those terms that are taking away
nefarious.
Your privacy and your other things. I mean, it's just, once you start really thinking about this, and once I start going down the bitching rabbit hole here, it goes really awful really fast. So let's go on to something else.
All right.
Okay, let's do that. Get some of my angst about some of this stuff. Yes. That's a funny typo there.
Yeah, you practically tarted.
I tarted it.
You are tarted.
Thank you, Xenu. I definitely get the sentiment, and I appreciate it. I have definitely been here for a while. But, maybe just because I was thinking about cults and how cults kind of propagate in our world, and how it is that this knowledge that we offer here on these channels, and I'll say channels, I mean, I go deep on the psych stuff, and I know other folks don't, but all the knowledge we offer here is all in service of trying to help everybody do better at this, and I hope that's, I like to, get that happening. Anyway, still getting my feet grounded on all the social media platforms and everything is kind of where I was trying to go with all of that. And I think once I have that settled, I'll have time again to start working on the tone scale video again, because all of that kind of got pushed aside when I started the news show 7 weeks ago, and the social media work, and realized, well, I've got this body of work. I need to promote it more. I need to market myself better than I have been, because good works don't speak for themselves. I thought they would. They don't. So it's time for me to get it out there. And okay, so with all that being said, what is your quote for us for today, for this week?
Okay. This is about inspiration and creativity from Jack London. You can't wait for inspiration. You have to go after it with a club.
Just like I have to go after people. Hey, listen. All right, good. That is true. That is very true.
It's,
what did you get from that?
That you can't wait for it. That you have to, you have to try to find inspiration. Go look for it. Maybe you need to go walk around an art museum, or maybe you need to go take a hike. Whatever it is, you got to go look for it. It's not going to knock on your door.
Exactly.
And sometimes, but not all the time.
That's right. That is true. And of course, we would not leave you guys high and dry. Let us check out our Snuggles, Not Struggles cam, our bundle, for our furry bundle of joy and love here, our little Benson. This is him running around in the living room. He wanted to play, and I was trying to get camera of him, and he was kind of like, oh no, I must, we must be playing with toys right now, right? We must be doing that. And then he got down there with this bone that Mel got for him today, and he's just been tearing that
great
apart.
Little bones.
Oh, absolutely.
They're good for little doggies. He loves to chew on it. It keeps him distracted. It keeps him from chewing on other things.
Yes, he does get a little chewy.
Yes.
And so there he is going to town there in the living room. There he is, looking like his usual kind of cute self there. Oh, yeah.
Those eyes.
Yeah, he should get his own Instagram, actually.
Right? Benson TikTok. Oh, there's all his toys.
There's the toy box. Yep, there he is going, hey, man, aren't we going to be playing with these right now? I'm pretty sure that's what we were here for, right? Right?
Isn't that what we're doing?
Isn't that what we're doing? All right, so there's our... there it is. Okay, good. So there's our minute of Benson joy for you all. Loving that guy. And I do want to get those designs up. I can't believe it's been 2 weeks since I actually put something together, and I still haven't got it posted up on Spreadshirt. Really kind of silly. It's an interesting thing when you accept an ADHD diagnosis, but haven't really accepted it yet. It takes some getting used to, and by that I mean, of course, that I have to be more patient with myself because I have I have very ambitious to-do lists, and some days
you feel like it, and some days you don't.
Some days you don't. Yeah, it's a funny thing. All right, so let's get into sharing some wisdom here. Let's go over some things. I've got some monologuing to do. Actually, not total monologue. If you want to hop in at any point along the line here,
right.
We're going to talk about some psych stuff now. Pseudo-identity. Okay, so memory, trauma, and Scientology is the title of this week's episode. And what I was thinking about in putting this together are some things I've been talking with others about, thinking about, reading about, and finding papers on. And this is all, what I'm going to talk about today is sort of somewhat in the realm of between practical and the theoretical, there are things we know about this that we have used in treatments. I say we, I mean, people. I'm not a therapist, but in the world of psychology, right, there are some of these theories or some of these ideas that you have heard of, which we're going to go over today, that are useful in treatment or are useful in understanding different states, different places our brains go. And when we're talking about cults, or we're talking about high control groups, or we're talking about authoritarian groups, when we talk about thought reforming a person's thoughts, or which slides right over very easily into this whole brainwashing thing, and that's like cult, that's a very controversial word, and it shouldn't be. It's been used for agenda-driven purposes on all ends of ideological spectrums, and so people get all bent out about it. And some people get on their, in their ivory tower high horse and talk about how there is no such thing, which is just total horseshit. Because if you look at history and you look at now, you can see so many examples and instances of people who became somebody else under the influence of a group or an individual or an activity. And this has been noted. This is noteworthy. It is significant enough, a profound enough change in people that other people look at that and go, what is up with that? How, this is not the same person I knew. This is not the son I raised. This is not the daughter this is not my mother anymore. It can happen to anybody, and it can happen for lots and lots of different reasons. Sometimes the reasons are obvious and known, and sometimes the reasons are unobvious and unknown or mysterious. But the phenomena is still there of somebody's kind of acting a little whack all of a sudden. And what's up with that? Whack is a technical term, of course. And so, anyway. And when it comes to there were two things I wanted to throw out. There's this other thing I want to throw out here too, which is not directly on the line of the monologue, but it was just reminded today of this, and I wanted to bring it up to everybody. And that is on the topic of certainty, which is so tied in with all of this, because when it comes to finding answers to problems we are having, when it comes to our emotional needs, when it comes to what we want, it seems to me that I'm not projecting too much. And when I look out at people and I see an awful lot of them are craving this thing called certainty. But they actually, it's funny because a lot of people don't think about what that is. What is certainty? You think, oh, well, I'm going to learn a bunch of stuff and I'm going to have all this knowledge and that's going to give me certainty. Or I'm going to experience a thing and it's going to imbue me with this certainty. This, I know this is the thing. I know this is right. I know this is true. I'm certain of it. And you break this down, like so many things in psychology, you find surprising things. And one of the things about certainty is that it's an emotional thing. You feel certain. It's like belief or faith.
Yeah, it's not accurate. It's just what you just feel like you are certain. That doesn't mean you're right.
Well, exactly. It doesn't even mean that you have to know anything about the thing you are certain about.
Right, like the Dunning-Kruger stuff. It's just like...
That's right.
You're certain that you know the answer to something you've never read about, never watched a video about, but you know the answer.
That's right. And it's a constant source of annoyance.
I like that. That's a new word.
It's annoyment. It's a constant source of annoyance with people when they are confronted by people who are way too certain, way too sure, with no justification or reason for that. Well, that's because it's a feeling. It's an emotion. You can feel that way without any basis whatsoever for feeling that way. It's not a goal. It's not an end in and of itself, except for the fact that it makes us feel good. It makes us feel positive, sure. It gives us a sense of surety, of security, of safety even. I'm sure, I know, right? Did you lock the door? Yes, right?
Yeah.
And then you come home and the house is broken into. You know, I was so sure, right? Has nothing to do with facts, has nothing to do with objective reality. It's a feeling. And I just wanted to point that out. Actually, just that simple fact, just that's all I wanted to do is just point that out. Because the truth is, the more you learn, if there's any relationship with knowledge, it's Dunning-Kruger. It's that the more you learn, the less certain you become. Which says interesting things about people who are 100% sure about anything.
Yeah, don't trust that.
Right? You have to wonder. Right? You have to wonder about that. Now, of course, there are scientific principles and foundations and things we can all sort of, we have to rest on in some fashion or another in order to get along in life. We all have to be sure of some things. Otherwise, it would just be very hard for us to emotionally navigate life, because if you're unsure about everything, that can quickly lead to a whole other disordered state, right? And paranoia and all kinds of stuff with that. So certainty is not an enemy, but it is something to be aware of, in the same way that dopamine hits and rushes and awe and euphoria are states to be careful about. Because you're susceptible to doing really stupid things in those moments, right? Things that are not good for you because it just feels so right.
Yeah.
And so sure and so true and so good. And you got to go with that gut, baby. Right? And there are times when you do, and there are a lot of times that people are going to tell you do when you don't, when you shouldn't. Okay. So let's go over something else now, because this has to get into auditing and personality change cult recovery. This touches on all of it. Okay, we're going to walk through some things having to do with pseudo-identity and the treatment of personality change in victims of captivity and cults. And this is a paper that was written in 1994 by Jolly West, who you may have heard me and John Atack talking about recently, and another man, Dr. Paul R. Martin. And this has to do with disassociation. And so let's take a look at what that is first. You all have heard of disassociation. You've heard of dissociative personality disorders. Maybe if you've gone into psychology at all, this is a fairly not esoteric or deep psychology sort of thing. A lot of people have heard of this. Disassociation is a mental process of disconnecting from one's thoughts, feelings, memories, or sense of identity. Disconnecting from thoughts, feelings, memories, or sense of identity. The dissociative disorders that need professional treatment include dissociative amnesia, dispersonalization disorder, and dissociative identity disorder. You don't have to memorize this. There's no test at the end. There are 3 ways disassociation kind of manifests. And it doesn't require you to have a full-on disorder in order for disassociation to be coming into your life.
Right.
We have this all the time. Some people have referred to this as a trance state. I certainly have. Right? You just kind of a little not quite there. Now, there's other ways you could describe trance. There's other ways you could describe this stuff, but these are connected or related ideas, okay? And in what I just read, there is dissociative identity disorder, DID. You may have heard of this. This is multiple personalities, multiple distinct personalities. The various identities control a person's behavior at different times. The condition can cause memory loss, delusions, or depression. So disassociation can become a very serious thing. It's a spectrum. You can be a little disassociated. You can be a lot dissociated. You can be disassociated for short periods of time. You could be disassociated for years. It's happened. People have gone into states where they've lived their life, and then they come to a point, maybe in a euphoric state. John's mentioned this. John Atack has mentioned this to me, where somebody's entered into this sort of disassociative euphoric state, and when they came out of it, and he said, I have a hard time believing this even, but what John claimed was one guy claimed to be in this for 40 years.
Jeez.
You know, woke up one day and was like, what the hell just happened?
Wow.
Like, what? That is wild. That's a pretty extreme case. Scientology and auditing don't usually induce that level of disassociation where you're going to be so out of it for so long that, you know, you're going to flip personalities. But it manifests in other ways in auditing. And I wanted to get into some of this. So first, it was necessary that we take a look at this business of disassociation, separation from yourself. You can see yourself from outside of yourself when it refers here to the dispersonalization disorder, right? Where you're kind of seeing yourself from the corner of the room. You're outside yourself. Your life seems very unreal. Suddenly everything looks like it's a TV show. You know, drugs will induce this, right?
Yeah.
You can kind of get this very sort of separate from yourself feeling. And some of y'all might have felt this during drug trips. I mean, I have. And it's not necessarily none of this is necessarily horrible for you. This can happen in lots of different ways, but when it's forced on you, when you don't know it's happening, and worse, and this is going to be kind of the important part of a big important part of this, is when somebody is interpreting that event for you and calling it something else than it really is, that's when you are going to run into a lot of problems. And like, for example, if somebody slipped you some LSD, somebody slipped you some a pot edible.
Yeah, you're going to have a different experience than if you chose that.
That's right, because you're not going to understand what's happening. The context of the feelings and emotions and thoughts that you're having are there is no context. You don't know why you suddenly feel this very bizarre, weird feelings or these ideas that you're getting. And this is, of course, experiments have been done on this, and they were, pretty unethical that dropping acid on people. So if you then, what's that? Oh, okay. So if you have an interpretation or an explanation provided to somebody, and then you induce a dissociative state, they're not going to understand what's going on. They're going to think what's going on is what you told them is going on. And if that means you're exterior from your body, when you go exterior from your body, you can see yourself from the corner of the room. When you go exterior from your body, you feel as though you're separate from yourself. Well, what they're describing is the phenomena of disassociation, but what they're telling you is your spirit is moving out of your body. Scientology creates the reality that you are not your body. Like your body is literally in Scientology treated as though it's a pair of clothes, a suit of clothes you're wearing, or Hubbard analogizes it to a splinter in your thumb, and you're the Thetan.
Your Edgar suit, like in Men in Black.
Yeah, it's something not you, and because it's not you, all of the things that your body experiences. Getting sick, having accidents, having a headache, having problems or issues, having weird thoughts or ideas, having emotional ups and downs. That's not you. You're this separate entity who's above and apart from all of that. And in fact, the condition of your Thetan is what's creating those bad effects in the body. You're sick, your emotional ups and downs, your accidents are because of your spirit, and its condition has nothing to do with the body. The body is malleable, and you can do whatever you want to with it whenever you want to. That's what being OT is supposed to be all about, is cause over your body, cause over the things in your life, because you are not any of these things. You're disconnected from them. And the more you realize that in Scientology, supposedly, the better off you are. The more aware you are, the more OT you are. The idea in Scientology is that disagreement with the common idea that you're a body, or or that this is somehow you. It's the more you can disagree with this trap that you're caught in here, the more OT you are, the more free you are, the more able you are, the more spiritually aware you are. Well, now that you kind of got all that picture painted, right? When we look at dissociative phenomena, the feeling like you're out of your body, feelings of multiple personality, feelings of having different personalities, right? Different identities. Or the third manifestation of disassociation can be amnesia, just memory loss. Just have no memory of what's going on. Dissociative phenomena are not necessarily symptomatic of illness. Doesn't mean you're mentally ill or any kind of illness. It's a mental psychological phenomena. It probably has evolutionary value. There's probably survival value to this. That's not the part we're talking about today. We're talking about how this is used badly. So you talk about how there's a sort of a spectrum or continuum of this. The distortion or alteration of a person's identity and the appearance of a new and different persona remains one of the most interesting manifestations of disassociation. Prolonged environmental stress or life situations profoundly different from the usual can disrupt the normally integrative functions of personality. Personality's going along, integrating things, receiving perceptions, processing them, predicting what's coming next. That's your brain's function. And your personality is a manifestation of that. And when you have prolonged environmental stress or profoundly different life situations, things have been upended, you've moved to a new town, you've just lost your job, you just got divorced, somebody very, very close to you has died. There's a profound change in your existence. When these things happen, this can disrupt how our personalities normally integrate things. We can become overwhelmed with too much. If you look at trauma and you look at PTSD and what this is, you're talking about sensory overload. You're talking about, or at least that's one way of producing it, is you just give, you put somebody into a combat situation, you put them into a survival situation where every single move they possibly can make is a threat to them, is not going to be right, no matter what they do. So it's trying to calculate the least harmful thing to do. When you're in those kind of situations, right, or you feel like you are, things can get a little wonky. Your thinking changes up radically. And the brain is trying to process this overwhelming information and is having a hard time. Information subjected to such forces may adapt through disassociation by generating an altered persona or pseudo-identity. When we talk about the cult personality, I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I've been considering it ever since, which led me to this, is when we talk about the idea that somebody goes into a cult and they form a new personality, that new personality is not just happening just 'cause. It's happening in response to the new environment and the new information and the new rules and regulations that this person is now living under. They are adjusting to rules and concepts and acculturating themselves to a new situation that you ain't part of. So the people who are watching this happen from the outside are remarking on this incredible change that's happening to their family member or friend and wondering what the hell's going on. In the group, the person is being welcomed with open arms. Every change this person is making is a positive as far as the group is concerned. This person is rewriting who they are to fit in with the group, but it's not that logical. Okay? It's not that knowing. It's not that like, oh, here's what I'm doing today, right? Yesterday. Kind of
subconsciously that you're doing it.
This is all very under the hood kind of stuff that's happening. Conditions of brutal captivity, such as those experienced by prisoners of war, or captors who are forced to make false confessions. Scientology sect checks can generate a type of post-traumatic stress disorder in which dissociative features are prominent. Memory loss, personality disorder, disassociation, right? Out-of-body experience. How would multiple personality disorder, not the disorder, sorry, but how would that phenomena in an incident or a couple incidents, how would that manifest in Scientology?
Well,
past lives, anyone? Past lives, right? You're going to go back in your auditing and you're going to remember some other personality you had, some other incident that you were involved in. Could a trauma response be to create a different pseudo identity or personality? According to the research and the literature, yes. So could a past life be considered that? To me, it's a no-brainer, of course. Now, in the course of Scientology auditing, one recalls many, many past lives. Does every single one of them have to have dissociative disorder connected with it? Not necessarily, but the more a person invests in it, the more a person is taking that on and making this alternate personality that they supposedly lived at one time, they're actively creating the disassociation. I want to get out of my body so bad right now. Mary Sue Hubbard begged L. Ron Hubbard for processing for years to get her to exteriorize, because it just never happened for her, and she was really quite put out by it. And Hubbard had her audited on this and that and the other thing. And it never did really work. She never disassociated that way, which is fascinating. Some people don't, but some people do. I never got the whole looking at myself from the corner of the room thing. That never happened to me in all the years I was in. The most I ever got when I felt exterior was I felt a little bigger. And I definitely felt not my body, right? So I got shades of this, but there are people who like, man, I'm flitting around the universe right now. I'm on Mars, right? I mean, they really get into it. And when I started reading about this, it occurred to me, this is what I was reading about, right? This is what goes on in Scientology. And of course, if we start talking about the Sea Org, or we start talking about staff or the pressures that Scientologists are put under, then you can have a whole other outside of auditing disassociation event occurring as well, dissociative event. So you can have it, there's a few different ways, right? Like incredible stress and trauma that you're experiencing right now could cause this reaction. In an auditing session, you're being thrown ruthlessly into trauma. Dianetics is all about this. Scientology, to a lesser degree, is about this. You're being run through heavily traumatic incidents and episodes in your life. I mean, accidents, injuries, emotionally traumatic episodes, all of these, Dianetics is begging you to go into as part of your auditing. And when you're slammed into these trauma episodes, hypnotism and regression ain't what you need. And being told that this is all coming out of your reactive mind, this isn't you. This is this awful thing that you somehow live with, this invisible entity called the reactive mind. And it's the one that's feeding you all this bad stuff and all this charge. So again, you're being fed this line that your problems, your issues, your trauma isn't part of you. It's not you, but it is you, but it's not you. It's an invitation to enter a disassociative state. I hope this is coming across. In response to these conditions, their personalities begin to change in many cases. And they liken the first step in the thought reform process to the creation of an identity crisis, right? You come into the Sea Org, man, and you better yes sir, no sir, how high sir. I mean, I'm sure boot camp is like this for people, right? You get a little bit of a, oh my God, whatever I was doing before, it ain't working in this situation. I got to change things up. And if you're going to survive boot camp, you have to do that. Well, the Sea Org is an awful lot like that, except it's not just for 3 weeks or 3 months or however long boot camp is. It's for the rest of your fucking life. And it never gets better. And it never lightens up. And the environment never is kind to you. You are always in a hostile environment when you're in the Sea Org. And a lot of the time when you're on staff. Like a lot. And when you're in a hostile environment and your brain is tuned into, okay, it's time to stress time, and you make a permanent situation out of that, you are begging for this dissociative phenomena to come in hard, and it does. What's that? Oh, hey, welcome to the membership there. Awesome. Thank you for that, for signing up. Here's another part I highlighted. While the thought reform program of the Chinese communists, if you look back at Lifton and his research into, POWs and people who had been brainwashed by the Chinese communists when the Maoist revolution happened, while the thought reform program of the Chinese communists to convert people to right thinking was hardly subtle, they were not that. The indoctrination techniques applied to new recruits by contemporary totalist cults can be very subtle indeed. Subjects are forced to communicate verbally and continuously in a strictly controlled fashion. Most of these cults rely also on the effects of structured group dynamics, environmental manipulation and control, the relationship of dominant leaders to dependent members, the relative initial isolation of recruits from previous ideas or relationships, and the evolution of a new identity with constant group pressures to bring errant individuals into line. So basically all we're saying there is you get into a cult and it's really not a whole lot different. It's just a lot more subtle. But the techniques and the strength and power that those techniques are with which they are being applied to you are just as intense, or can be just as intense, as we see in I don't know, I'm just going to say it because I've done a truth rundown. I know how deep this stuff goes. And I'll say, you know, as hardcore as what you will find in a re-education camp or in Guantanamo Bay. Now, you don't have in Scientology the physical beating usually going on. That's not a part of an auditing session, but it can be. Remember what we've talked about for hours here about objective processes. Objectives are where your body is being moved around the room forcefully. You are being manhandled around a room or a space. And if you're not complying with the auditor's instructions, the auditor's going to force you to do it. And you're not getting out of that room until you do, over and over and over and over and over again, not just once. It goes on for hours and hours and hours, right? So physical stress and trauma is very much part of what Scientology is doing to people at all levels. Everybody in Scientology goes through those objective processes, and they are not a joke. They are exactly what I'm reading here. Okay, here's a part. Yeah, this business of not them, right? Successful indoctrination of a cult member often includes many elements similar to the political indoctrination by such groups as the Chinese communists. In cults, as in the Chinese brainwashing, thought reform, or coercive persuasion, people are often encouraged to criticize themselves in small group confessionals as a means of strengthening their dependence on the group. Confessionals, right? The confession culture, the snitch culture, reporting on each other. If you're not going to confess, I'm going to confess for you. Right? That's what that's all about. It's totalist control. It's not just some nice little system to keep track of people or correct errors in the organization. It is a brutal system of control. As the process continues, members are systematically trained to relinquish independent action and thought, since only obedient behaviors and passive attitudes are rewarded, while resistance or self-assertion is punished. And I noted here, when you find fault with somebody's behavior in Scientology, you assign it to their reactive mind. And once they're clear, it gets 1,000 times worse for the OTs, because what happens to them? What are they? Okay, on the OT levels, especially once you get up to hit the stride and you hit OT 7, which is the real big daddy. That's the years and years long process. But at OT 3 is when you're introduced to the concept of body thetans. Body thetans. Thousands and thousands and thousands of body thetans are what make up your body. This is what you read in the materials. Your body is composed of body thetans. That's why they're called body thetans, because they constitute your body. And if you audit them all out, and this makes no fucking sense at all. So I'm not even asking you to like make sense out of this. I'm just telling you, this is what Scientologists have to figure out and make sense of, is that their body is made up of disembodied thetans, and by exorcising them through the OT process, you contact each of them telepathically in an auditing session with an e-meter. And this is supposed to be something that's part of you, but is an entirely separate personality. And you're going to contact it. You're going to have a whole conversation with it. You're going to give it commands, and you're going to rehabilitate it. because that little thetan attached to your body represents some problem or issue or situation in your life. And by contacting and rehabilitating the thetan and sending it off on its way, you're supposed to be getting rid of that problem or issue or condition in your life.
If only.
Right? It's like magic. Except none of this is true. It's all happy horse shit. And OTs practice doing this and do this on OT7 especially every single day. 7 days a week, mandatory. You can't get around it. You can't. Once you begin on OT7, there are no breaks. There's no stopping. There's no taking a vacation. You go in session every day, dude. And if you don't, you're going to be in a whole lot of trouble. They want you going in session 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. And every time you go in session, you're creating another personality to send off on its way. And I'm not suggesting that every single one of those becomes a multiple personality thing. And at the end of it, an OT has 10,000 different personalities. I'm not suggesting it's that crazy. What I'm suggesting is by making the idea that all your problems and issues are something separate from you, you are creating a personality disorder in a person because you're doing it over and over and over and over again to the point that that you can't even convince them that this is not reality anymore. You want to know why some people go absolutely bonkers on the OT levels? This is why. This is not small grade stuff. This is the anatomy of PTSD. And complex PTSD is multiple traumatic episodes over time, reinforcing this kind of behavior, this kind of psychological damage. And I'll call it damage because that's what it is in this context. It's not good for you to be thinking that all your problems and issues are not you. It's definitely not good to be thinking that all of your negative emotions, negative reactions, and misdeeds, moral transgressions, are all committed because of some demon in your head called a reactive mind or a body thetan. It's not.
Yeah, because then you'll never take responsibility.
Yeah. Exactly. And you wonder why Scientologists trumpet responsibility all the time, but can't seem to grasp what that really means in the real world. Scientology parents are hardly ever responsible for their kids. The Sea Org is never responsible for anything that ever happens anywhere to anybody, right? And yet it's claiming it's taking ownership and responsibility for the planet. They don't have the first concept of what responsibility means. Because everything is something different and separate from them, right? But I digress a little bit into the, into the bigger picture here. On a personal level, this is very, very damaging to people. And when we talk about why recovery from Scientology is so hard, this is one of the big reasons why. Because if you've had a lot of auditing, then you've had this pushed on you and you've been carefully indoctrinated with every single session you do, no matter what kind of auditing you're getting, you are heavily indoctrinated to believe that you are dealing with things that are not you. So you'll never be able to actually own them or deal with them as something that's yours. Mm-hmm. It's this very bizarre double take. It's like you do, but you don't, And sometimes, of course, accidents happen. And in auditing sessions, people have aha moments and realize something about themselves and go, oh, yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that anymore. Maybe that wouldn't be such a good thing to do. Or maybe I shouldn't be down on myself all the time or whatever. And they can make some kind of positive change. But that's few and far between when you're being head-butted into a stone wall every single session by being convinced that, or actually creating dissociative incidents. And it's so interesting to me how a great deal of Scientology auditing goes out of people's memory. It's a really interesting phenomenon. I've been talking to people about it. I used to notice when I was all the way back in Santa Barbara, I used to notice how people would come back from having done the L rundowns, the most expensive auditing in Scientology, even now. It's like $12,000 for an intensive or something. It's tremendously expensive. There are 3 L rundowns, L as in the letter L. And each one of them costs mega money, and you do them in a certain order, and it requires the highest trained auditors in Scientology to deliver these things. People would go do them, and they would come back, and sometimes this would also happen with other kinds of flag-only rundowns or things that people would go to flag to do. Sometimes it would happen even in Santa Barbara, where they would come out of their session or they'd come back talking and raving about how great their auditing was, and you go, oh, wow, that's amazing. Well, what happened? You know, you don't go too deep into this, but sometimes people would ask, well, what was the auditing? You know, what was it? How was it different? Or what was it like? Or what happened in the session or something? And they'd look at you, they looked at me, and they just kind of get this look, and they go, you know, I don't even remember. I can't even remember my sessions. I can't remember what happened. I can't remember the commands I was given, but I was so blown out of my head that I was as big as the solar system. And I look at that now and I'm thinking, oh, fuck, dude. Like, talk about disassociated, right? And
can't even remember it, yeah.
Exactly. And a trauma response to disassociation is amnesia. Is you will forget things. Mm-hmm. And isn't that convenient for Hubbard? Because I don't think he knew the first thing about this stuff. I think he just took advantage of the phenomenon. I think he noticed, being a hypnotist as well as master manipulator, that he could do things and say things to people. And he would talk about this in his lectures, by the way. He'd talk about how you could come up on somebody. I didn't even get to it in this paper, but it's referenced in this paper. You could come up on somebody. He said witch doctors used to do this, and like old tribal shaman used to do this, is you'd come up on them and they didn't see you coming, or they somehow weren't expecting it, and you do some big surprise thing at them, right? And scare the shit out of them. They'd have these masks with all these ugly things on them and stuff. And that was the reason, is that they'd pop out of the bushes and scare the fuck out of you. And you're like, brah! And in that moment, in that little microsecond of shock that they're experiencing, Hubbard said that you could give a command to the person in a normal tone of voice, even whisper it to them, and they wouldn't register. They wouldn't remember that part, because the trauma of the shock has got all their attention, or has got their brain all rattled. And in that moment, right then, immediately, no lag at all, get in there with whatever command you want to give them, right? Stop, hold, kill yourself, whatever it is you want to do. And it's not necessarily that it's like 100% effective. People are varying degrees of susceptibility to this. But it's interesting that he talked about that as like it was a phenomenon he was very familiar with. He also talked about how you could do that to people when they were in that sort of gray zone of sleep.
Oh, okay.
Right? When they're in a deep sleep and they just start coming out, or they're going in, and you could whisper things and it would go subconsciously right in. And it kind of bothered me that Hubbard would say these things, and I'd be like, what? There's this random thing that he says, right? Point is, I don't think Hubbard would have called it disassociation or had psych terms for it, but I think Hubbard understood that there were ways you could go about manipulating people that were not obvious and that they would not remember. And there are. And this is kind of the heart and soul of it here. This dissociative theory is, there's a lot to this. And so I wanted to cover it because I thought this has everything to do with why auditing is effective. Always looking to take auditing apart, because it's the core of Scientology. It's the most powerful thing Scientology has and does, is they audit people. All the stuff with the toothbrushes and the torture and the conditions and the KRs and all of that. That's important stuff. That's environmental control. That's coercion. There's lots of reasons all that stuff is there. But it doesn't hold a candle to the psychological damage that is done to people in auditing. That's where the money's made. That's where the manipulation is dialed up to 20, not just 11. And that is where every minute, every piece of that auditing process is designed to weaken you, to make you more compliant, more controllable, and less able to think critically about any of it. The education that you're given, the indoctrination that goes into you becoming a Scientology pre-clear is extensive. I don't know if I've ever really covered all of it. It's a lot. You don't walk in off the street, sit down, and start getting commands. That's not how auditing works. You are indoctrinated. They call it indoctrination, by the way. You're indoctrinated as a pre-clear. And there is a whole list of stuff you got to learn before you're going to get audited. You got to learn about yourself. You got to learn about a thetan. You got to learn about the reactive mind. You got to learn about charge and communication. And all these Scientology concepts are broken down for you before you're given your first command. It takes hours. It's called a Scientology CS1. It's the first thing you're supposed to get case supervisored for. That's the CS, right? The person who's directing what you're going to get audited on. There's a program. It's a form. Everybody does all the steps on this form. And that indoctrination sets you up so that when they cause a disassociated euphoric state in you, you're all ready for what all this means. And because they can induce it in you, you believe they have some kind of magic power called the tech. Because you never felt this way before. Well, you have, you just don't remember it. Or it was under different circumstances. But it feels so amazing, and the interpretation of what you're being told, why this is happening to you. You're out of your body. You're a thetan. You blew charge. You're getting rid of trauma. No, they're actually creating more and more trauma for you. That's what's actually happening. And that's why I needed to talk about this, right? So I found a paper on this that kind of breaks it down. Jolly West, definitely somebody who knows what he's talking about. This is really good stuff. And so I thought, if we can understand, and the reason also why I try to throw this out there for people is not just for education of the general public, but also for former Scientologists. I really hope that, this information can get to them somehow. And I'll probably have to do a whole podcast on this as well. And because a lot of folks don't watch the Friday show, but this is what I've explained here today is how Scientology fucks you psychologically, right? A major component in how they're screwing people, right? Is they're inducing these states and they're calling it something else. It's a bug and they're calling it a feature. Right? It's hurting you and they're calling it help. That's how fucked up it is. Right? And it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. So, so I'll probably, like I said, I'll probably be refining this talk a little bit and figure out some other things on this in terms of how to communicate it. But I really want to get this out into the Scientology community. This needs to be understood. People who are recovering from Dianetics and Scientology need to understand what was done to them in auditing, because far too many people come out of Scientology thinking, well, the auditing was good. Well, at least I had some wins. It's like, man, you really got to get what this is about, because then it can be addressed with reality. Then therapy could work at a whole different level. You could start looking deeper at things that you weren't even aware of before if you look at it through this lens. So that's why I'm putting it out here this way. So okay. So that all being said, how's our comments? I know we're running out of time
all right.
here.
I don't think we have any major questions or anything.
Okay, good. Nobody screaming for my head or my blood or anything.
No one's coming after you.
Chris Shelton, you moron. How could you say those things? My auditing was wonderful. Just another way of looking at it. Okay, let's wrap up.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks for sticking with me on this one, guys. I hope I really hope this makes sense. I hope what I've said has made sense. I didn't even get to read all the highlighted bits and pieces I had. I just wanted to cover this in such a way it would be understood. So I hope it is. While she's getting the card for tomorrow, I will preview the podcast for tomorrow. It's the return of Melanie Tressick King. She is a critical thinking teacher and educator, and she's awesome. And we had a very interesting conversation about the barriers to critical thinking, the things that get in our way. And of course, I brought all the cult stuff in our discussion on that. And she actually gave me a little exercise that was a little bit trippy for me in the middle of that. So. I love my commenters. You guys are so awesome. All right. Anyway, so that podcast will drop tomorrow, and I'm planning on pre-recorded Q&A. That's my plan right now. Okay. So watch for that on Sunday, usual time. And if I'm going to change it up, if I get lazy tomorrow or circumstances, I will definitely announce it on the channel here. Okay. So what is our cognitive bias of the week?
Curse of knowledge. Once you understand something, you presume it to be obvious to everyone. It can be hard to remember our own prior state of confusion when we didn't understand something. When teaching someone something new, go slow without being patronizing. That's a hard one for me. Really, you don't get this?
I must say, this is absolutely a problem I have had, and that is a problem I have had for sure. It's funny how when you get a bunch of knowledge, you get a bunch of information, you just want to like data dump, and it's hard. It can be hard. Because there's a lot of other information backing up this stuff. And I think that's another reason why we didn't get through everything, is I wanted to take it slow and I wanted to go through all this stuff. But anyway, more content for next time. All right. So that all being said, did we have anything else?
I think that's everything.
I think that's everything. All right, folks, that's everything. Okay. Buy this book. Check out my merch site. Okay. Critical merchandise, link below. I do offer consultancy for people who need help. I do charge for it. Okay, it's not free, but it's really good. And it's, no complaints yet. Let's put it that way, right? So far, nothing but happy, satisfied customers. And of course, check out the podcast, check out the show, and please help me promote this work. Share it around. Tag me, don't tag me, whatever. Find me anywhere on social media at Chris Shelton, MSC. And with all that, good night.
Good night.